Well, thank you all very much for having me here. I had a wonderful introduction, thank you. So you know a little bit about my background, but I'm really grateful to you all for hearing this talk today and for allowing me to present. One, because I love to present. I think the more people that know about cybersecurity and about computers have opportunity to ask questions, the smarter we all are and the safer place and the internet can be and more productive that we can be. I also really like the opportunity to represent Catholics in the workplace who don't have their own business. I've never had my own business. I'm quite frankly terrified of having my own business. I will happily work for someone else. And that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years, mostly with big businesses. And then I moved into government. So presently I work at a federal laboratory, and my job there is to help our researchers. They're working on renewable energy projects, to help our researchers make sure that the computers and the technologies they use that have embedded computers inside of them remain safe, free of bugs, remain safe from people who have an interest in our nation, remain safe from people who just want to get a couple extra bucks off of our company or steal some of our intellectual property. So that's what I do kind of day in, day out. But I'm not a small business owner. So in order to prepare for this presentation, I found that to be a little bit challenging because I had to really wrap my head around what does a small business care about and how is that different from what I work on every day. So I asked a little bit for a little bit of inspiration from the saints. I found that there are actually two patron saints, or one blessed, of the internet. There was a group in the 2000s that formed the Order of Saint Isidore. And I think they started working on that idea in like the 1990s. It's a bunch of Catholic workers who were in tech who wanted to represent faithful and responsible use of the internet. So they formed an order around this. You can actually look it up online. It's kind of interesting, kind of like the Knights of Columbus. They have their own knights and ladies in waiting and all these kind of things as well. So it's sort of interesting. But the reason they chose Saint Isidore is because Saint Isidore had an ambition to compile all the books of knowledge into one place. And so he started a project called the Etymologiae. Now, the other saint is more modern, soon to be saint, Carlo Acutis. As of May of this year, he will be canonized by Pope Francis. So blessed Carlo Acutis lived a brief life. He passed away from leukemia at the age of 15, but his ambition in life was to use the internet to reach as many people as possible in order to draw people back to the Mass and to the Eucharist. Now, when I started researching this, it sort of resonated with me as a person who works in IT and works with computers, and especially the story of Blessed Carlo. When he was born, I was already 13 years old. But we both grew up in a time where using computers and using the internet was like a free-for-all fun space. It was also a great place to meet people, to work on projects, to get your message out. Everybody had a platform on there. And I wish that things could always be that way on the internet. There's a lot of things that are very good about using technology and about using the internet. You get information exchange going. Anybody can have a platform to get your message out. You learn new skills easily. It enables business opportunities, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. And it enables a lot of innovation that makes life easier. I love the fact that I could drive here, time my drive using a Waze application that works off of location-based antennas, and also listen to the Bible in a Year podcast. I love that about the internet. That's all the good uses of the internet when it's used faithfully, when it's used with temperance, when it's used with prudence. But there is a bad side of the internet as well. And I know that some of you are also experienced with and have some familiarity with it too. A lot of the information on the internet is total overload, and much of it is total garbage. There's questionable credibility of some of the information that's on the internet, and there is also ways that people curate that information in order to make it seem more believable. Some of that is to fool you, some of that is to promote their own ideas and platforms. So you have to be very smart when you're using the internet and think about what you're seeing. It can also dehumanize connections with others, and it makes it prone to abuse. Even in the early days of the internet, the fact that you could be online and anonymous made it easy to participate in, or perpetuate crime, which is something we're going to talk about here today because that can affect your business. It's also difficult to regulate, and it's difficult to pursue criminal activity. We'll talk about that a little bit later too, and we'll have a case study or cameo from Chris Kaplis to help tell us about his experience with some of this activity and its impact on his small business. So the goals for this session overall are I'd like you to come away with an understanding of why what I call cyber safety or cybersecurity and data privacy are important to your small business, why you should consider this. Secondly, be introduced to some tools and techniques that you can use to keep yourself safe. Now, I named this practical on purpose because I wanted it to be things that anybody can do, like you can leave this room, go home, and do some of this stuff right away. So I kept it at a very high level. I'd also like you to know the importance of planning for a breach or a hack and how to do that. That is very important for small businesses to consider because it can reduce not only the potential that something bad could happen, but if something bad happens, when it happens, what's your level of preparedness? And you can reduce your level of loss, you can reduce your level of liability. Okay, so a little bit of terminology first. I kind of use these words a little bit interchangeably. When you read the news and so on, you'll hear people talk about cybersecurity, and that's really about keeping your network and your computer systems safe. You'll also hear terms like data privacy. When you talk about data privacy, it means keeping the information safe. I like to think of these all as one family. I call it cyber safety. It's avoiding problems. How do we do things that when we use technology, prevent personal attacks and criminal activity on you, on your business, on your family? So first, a brief survey before we launch into more content on that topic. How many people in this room have ever received a call from a fake tech support person? A few of you have. How many people have ever had to replace a credit card? Almost everybody. How many people have seen suspicious ads or pop-ups when you're searching the internet? Like, your computer's been breached. It's just flashing. It's like, emergency, emergency. My son saw one of those one day when he was on a website. And most of the time, they are incentives to click. The fact that they popped up doesn't necessarily mean that you're hacked, right? But they want you to click on it. So they make it look like a 1,000-alarm emergency. My son found one of those when he was, I don't know, getting a Minecraft thing one day, and he turns around to me and he's like, "Mom, I've been hacked," and he's crying. Like, calm down. Those things are made to make it seem like an emergency. We will talk about some of how and why people do those things and trickier ways that they kind of prompt you into doing something that puts you at risk. So we all have a little bit of experience with cybersecurity issues in one way or another. How does this relate to small businesses? Why my business? Most cybercrime out there, reports for the last several years, you'd be very surprised to learn it's all about money. A lot of it is about people wanting to make money. That's the number one reason why people perpetuate cybercrime. The espionage, like I'm here to steal your intellectual property so I can get a competitive advantage, is a very distant second to I'm here to make money off of exploiting you. And the conditions for doing so are right, and they are increasingly right for that. Organized crime is behind 60% of cyber attacks, even on small businesses. It's not just a person sitting in their basement anymore. These are organized groups of people who actively go out and farm for accounts that are not secure, business accounting that is not secure, other things that they can pry into in order to steal from you. This is organized, not just mom's basement kind of stuff. Artificial intelligence makes it a lot easier. AI, if any of you have people used any AI tools before? Just like to ask a question. I ask it like, what's a good French toast recipe or something like that, just things like that, right? AI, it makes your life a lot easier. It makes criminals' lives a lot easier too. When you would get a spam message in the past and it would say, "Dear sir or madam, I am writing because I want to," and it has a bunch of typos and stuff like that, AI makes it flawless and it makes it look perfect. It makes it look believable. So these tools are being used by criminals in order to go after you as well. Complexity also makes it really hard to prepare. I would bet that none of us actually knows, like we know that, okay, I use XYZ bank, and when I go to the bank and I put my cash in there, it goes into their vault, and then it's accounted for in their computer system. Who has access to all that stuff in their computer system? And when you go and use an accounting system and it pulls details from your bank, oh, that one has access to it too. When I go and use my credit card, oh, that has access to my bank too. Those are all different companies. This has become an increasingly complex ecosystem of information and computers where people don't know anymore that, my money is in this safe right here. It's all over the place, necessarily so because that enables business, but it's also so complex it's difficult to wrap our minds around where are all the little places where somebody could get in. A lot of small businesses can't afford 24/7 security. It's maybe not on the plan, right? You're not going to go out and buy some kind of service for big corporations to protect maybe 3, 4, 5 computers that you might have. Some people only have one. It doesn't make financial sense to do so. And so you're kind of left to your own devices in order to be able to figure out, what am I going to do? And then the last question here is kind of an important one. If criminals can get a big score from going after a really big company, why would they go after mine? It's all volume. They know where to pry in, and they're going to make up for what they don't get by going after a big company, by going after many, many, many small ones in volume. That's why they organize around these types of things. Some common small business threats and some terminology that you might hear are these here. The top one, ransomware, is still the #1 threat to small businesses. Ransomware is coercing you to download something to your computer, either by clicking on something or opening a file that is infected in order to encrypt your computer. It basically locks you out of your entire computer, and it holds it hostage. It'll pop up a message that says, if you don't pay me X amount of dollars, usually they want Bitcoin or something like that, within X number of days, then I am going to either release your information to the internet or the dark web, if it's secret information, or I am going to just destroy it. And if you're not prepared for one of those events, then you might be tempted to pay their ransom. A lot of companies pay the ransomware because they don't have a choice. If they don't get their information back, they will go under. We're going to talk about ways to give you choices. Data theft is stealing information. Web-based attacks, coaxing you to click on something, click on a link or a bad site. A really good example, personal example of this, my son really wanted this pair of Converse tennis shoes, and they were very popular one year, and it was right before Christmas. And he says, Mom, there's a website right here. Look, they're 60% off. And he walks out of the room, goes into the bathroom or whatever, and I'm like, I better buy these right away before he's comes back, because I really wanted to get him this pair of shoes. Well, I didn't look carefully at what I clicked on, what the website looked at, etc. I went and made the purchase, and at the end, it didn't send me a receipt. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I go back and I look at the website, no contact information at the bottom, only sells 4 products. I've been doing this job for 20 years and I got had. They make these things really easy to pry you right when you're in a moment of to prey on your vulnerabilities, right when you're in a moment where you need something or you want something. It's tax season, right? You're going to see a lot of things like you need to do this in order for your taxes. The IRS is going to come after you unless you do this. You're going to see these types of things. Websites coaxing you to click on a link that just rises to the top of the search engine. Look at it carefully before you click on it and decide that that's the right place to go. Unprotected devices, hacking devices that have security flaws. We'll talk about how to prevent that. Malicious files, opening a file that looks like it's something that you expect or something that you like, hey, I want to send you the details of my plan, click on this PDF kind of thing, but it comes from an unexpected source. It's another way. And then email and social media scams of various types, like the Facebook ad that sells you, what was it? My dad wanted a talking trash can. Afterwards, my stepmom said, why would anyone need a trash can that talks? Right? But these things, it's like, oh, I can get it for free. If I just, buy this little thing from Costco, they'll send this thing for free from Costco, right? So you have to look carefully at everything nowadays to make sure that it's legitimate. Average damages, 1 in 3 small businesses have suffered a cyber attack. And I think we heard that during our introductions here today, that this has affected even people in this very room, some ways big and some ways small. But the average cost of a cyber attack, these are some statistics from Microsoft. It's really going to depend on the size of your business. Average cost of a cyber attack altogether is about $70,000 or up to $250,000. If it gets to be the worst case scenario, up to $7 million. You may not have $7 million to spare. Depends, it scales with the size of your business, but the point is they're very expensive. And there's a lot of things to consider. It's not just, I lost my information, I have to recreate it, the cost of that. If you owe any fines, if you have missed opportunities, or you're gonna lose out on future business opportunities because people are wondering if your business is secure, do you have to pay someone to help you do investigation and recovery? You've got to consider all of these costs when you are looking into a cyber attack. I want to turn it over for a moment to Chris Kaplis, who has offered to tell us a little bit about a cyber attack that happened to him, share his story in hopes that we will all learn from some of this and maybe generate some good questions for you all as well. So, Chris.
Thank you, Sheri. Can you give him the microphone?
Yes.
Thank you. So I get the pleasure of telling you how I was duped. It's always humbling, but as a small business owner, for the last 2 years, my partner and I started Humble Energy Services. We provide completion chemicals to the oil and gas business upstream. And it's my partner and I, and we have 2 contract employees, so there's 4 of us. And in my ignorance, I didn't think we were a target. You know, we're so small, we're new. That's not true. And so I went through GoDaddy for my website, GoDaddy for my emails, like a lot of people do. And I saw enhanced email security when I signed up. And I thought, well, we're good. Well, that's not true either. And so my email was hacked. And so our biggest customer by far, received an email from me, which was not me, but the hackers used my email to get our checking account information changed. And so I went a month and a half with no payments from our biggest customer, and it was a perfect storm in that they were about to get purchased, this company that we are working with, they were about to get purchased. So I thought, and I contacted their accounting group a couple times, hey, I haven't been paid. And they're like, well, we're in the process of getting bought, so there could be a delay. So it's kind of a perfect storm in that way. So 6 weeks go by, and finally they reach out to me and they're like, our last payment to you was sent back, kicked back. And I'm like, well, that shouldn't be the case. And they're like, well, we're sending it to your new checking account, and you need a check on your end. I'm like, I didn't change my checking account. So that's when the door was open to, oh my gosh. So we were hacked. So at that point, they had paid, close to $1 million to a fake account that was immediately, investigated. We sent a FBI report in, never heard from the FBI in the last 5 months. Have not heard from them, not one time. And I then reached out to my attorney, who started the process of demanding information from the banks and from our customer. And the account was closed. There was no way that we could get our money back, was the initial consensus. So at that point, we as a small company have to decide what we're going to do. And this is it's not just cyber focused, it's what did we do after the fact, so you guys would know. You have to get an attorney, and they have to demand things from whoever is involved. And so we got all the information. It was obviously a mistake on the accounts payable department of our main customer. They did not call me to confirm the change in account information. And I would have thought that would have been a standard practice to call someone to verify a change in account. They didn't do that. They have since changed their policy, but they received a new checking account information form with a bogus voided check which, as Sheri said, it had mistakes all over it. It's like my 12-year-old son created it on the computer, and they accepted this and paid it. So after my attorney researched the topic, which is becoming more and more prevalent, the precedent has been set in the courts that the last person who has the best chance to stop the fraud is liable, and that was their accounts payable department. They had the information. They didn't call me. They could have stopped the fraud. So my attorney sent them the information. Hey, we're going to litigate if we can't come to some agreement. And we came to an agreement and were able to recover basically half of the money. So we got hit pretty hard. So then I get asked, well, why didn't you go to court? Well, we could have gone to court, and then I would have to slander my biggest customer and prove how incompetent they are, and then I would be sent packing, I'm sure. So we chose the latter, to settle, move on, lesson learned. So for this group, number one, make sure your master service agreement with your customers require some sort of verbal verification, okay, on their end. And then make sure you have enhanced email security would be my recommendation. GoDaddy does have an enhanced, you have encryption options. I didn't know that. I've got that now. And then I also hired, as she mentioned, a third-party Denver desktop support is the name of the individual who monitors our account now. And so you can, I think he's $200 a month for our 4 computers to monitor that information. So it's money we think is well spent, so you can do those types of things. And multi-factor authentication was probably the biggest. Multi-factor authentication on your QuickBooks account, for your bank account, for your vendors as well. Do that wherever you can. It's like the club. Remember the club on the car? The club, it's a deterrent. And so if they see you have multi-factor authentication, they'll probably just move on to somebody that's a lot easier a target, which was us. Final comment would be, if you are a victim, there is a group called Max Sure, M-A-X-X Sure, and Jesper is his name. He has contacts, and I just found this guy. It's a little too late now, but he said there's a Interpol coalition of 200 countries that use the Secret Service and other things like that to track down these people, and they can claw back a lot of your money. Even if you don't hear from the FBI, you reach out to Jesper at Max Sure, they can get you some of your money back because they have the network to do that. So yeah, just be vigilant, be wise. It had to have been a phishing email that got me. That's what they had to have accessed. So I don't remember. We could never find the actual email that caused the hack. But like Sheri's saying, be vigilant in everything you're clicking on. So that's it. Hopefully y'all can learn something from our experience. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, so let's go. This is going to be kind of a review because Chris basically shared a lot of the other information I'm going to share with you. How do you prevent this stuff in the future? I like to look at this as a cycle. You need to secure your stuff as best as you can, and there's some practical things that Chris talked about that I'm going to review as well that you can do. You need to detect and avoid scams and hacks. That means being vigilant when you're doing things to make sure that you stop. Think about it. Is this normal? Is this expected? It's a little bit weird. Maybe I should call someone. And then knowing what to do when an event occurs. And if you can think of this as a cycle where, well, what kind of thing, if you start even where know when to do when an event occurs, start with that. What am I going to do if I can't get into my computers? What am I going to do if all my data is destroyed? What am I going to do if my email account gets hacked? What could someone do? Thinking down those lines could help you figure out how better to prepare, where you want to invest money in services in order to help you. Is insurance worth it? Those types of things. So thinking about this as a cycle is important. Simple steps that you can do. The top one up there, enable two-factor login for your account. Do it on every account that you have. That is the number one thing that in my experience with any business, big, small, individuals, etc., that will keep people out of your account most of the time. They're going to have to do extra work if they want to fool someone into allowing you into the account on the second factor. But that's things like using the Microsoft Authenticator app. There's apps you download on your phone. The Google Authenticator app. There's Authy. There's a bunch of different apps. Google Authenticator is pretty popular. If you look at your accounts, including your email accounts, go into your settings and you'll see something, and it'll be called either like MFA or 2FA, two-step login, whatever. If you have no other options, at least have it send you a text message. Text message, not great because it's easy to fake, but at least have it send you a text message. Better, use an authenticator app that you download from the App Store. If you want to get really high tech, you can also buy a little key fob. Well, I use a YubiKey that you plug into your computer as your second factor. You can do that too. Not everything supports it, but most of them will do an app at least. So always look at that. Secondly, use different passwords. Use a password vault to manage your passwords. When I say password vault, do people know what that means? Does that resonate with anyone? Okay, a few people. All right, so what I mean by that is there are applications out there, a lot of them are free, and some of them are really good, that you can use in order to store all of your passwords. And it'll have a little widget that goes in your browser to make it easy to populate your passwords. The great thing about password vaults is it stores them with encryption. You don't have to remember them, so you can make them this big long string of gobbledygook that's really hard to figure out. Password Vault remembers them for you. You can also use it to make different passwords on every service that you have. Because think of it this way, I use one password on my email. If someone gets into my email and they know that password, but that password is also used on my bank, that password is also used on my newspaper account, that password is also used on Netflix, whatever else, you can see how these things are related. You want to differentiate as much as you can. Password vaults help you with that. Running automatic software updates is important. I know it's super annoying when your phone comes up and says, we got to do a security update, or your computer says, hey, I have security updates to run. They've made it less annoying over time. Do it. It's important. Reboot when you're done with it. A lot of people do it and then they just never reboot their computer. This is a common problem that I see in any business scenario is I've got all my things open. I can't close them all, right? Set a time on your schedule to close all of the things and just reboot it. Like, just do it once a week, because those updates that you run are not effective until after the computer reboots. Back up your important data. You don't have to be fancy with this. You could go to Costco and buy one of those like 8 terabyte Seagate drives or whatever and just plug it in once a week and run the automatic backup program that's on Windows or on the Mac. Mac uses a time machine, I think. So backing up your data and then separating your business from your personal devices. Making sure that you've got good controls on both. Avoiding scams and hacks. Being cautious about what you share online. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Configuring your account monitoring alerts. I use these all the time on credit cards and so on, and it has saved me many, many times. I will put it down to I want to know if anybody spends more than $0 on my credit card. Even if it's me, I still want the assurance that, oh, I saw that transaction go through. The time I saw a transaction go through for a hotel in Miami, and I went and asked my husband, David, are we going on vacation? And he says, no, that's not me. I was very disappointed for more reasons than one. But it's important, and you can configure these things to very low thresholds so you're always aware of what's going on. Recognizing the signs of a scam. If it creates a sense of urgency, seems too good to be true, if it's from an unexpected source, has an unusual request in it, suspicious links and files, like you mouse over it, it says, here, we're here from Microsoft, and you mouse over it and it says some garbage.xyz, something like that. And generic salutations. Dear sir or madam, to whom it may concern, they don't know you, they're just sending you some stuff. Could be marketing mail, a lot of that stuff, if it's marketing mail, you just delete it. Some of that stuff has links to things that are going to ask you for your password or say, hey, can you share us your name and address and we'll send you free stuff. It's a scam. You don't need to click on it in order to prove it. Just delete it. If it looks suspicious, delete it. If it looks like it comes from somebody you know, Chris already mentioned this, call them and ask them, hey, did you send me this? Don't click on that stuff. I mentioned earlier, AI makes this really easy for people to create very convincing scammy emails to you. And they will research you online if you have something that you want and send you an email. I've seen these happen in business where they will look through our organization chart. I have a lot of researchers that I work with that have public profiles because that's how they attract research. They market themselves. They will research who is this person's manager and what kind of research do they work on. They'll pose as someone from a college and say, hey, I need help with my research project. They'll start a conversation with that person and they'll try to build a relationship with that person. And then they use that as an entry to send them a scam. So beware of what you share online about yourself because criminals will work on that as well. I know as a small business, some of that is necessary, but some of it, if they're looking at your social media profiles, for example, to find out that you have kids and that you go here or here, you enjoy this or that, they use that information in order to scam you. Responding to an event, 3 steps: regain control, report the event, and assess for other impacts. There's stuff that you can do on your own. If you think that you've been hacked, change your passwords. Put that 2-factor authentication on and do that right away. You don't have to call anybody or ask permission. You can do that right away. Pause using untrustworthy computers until you've had them looked at. If someone has been on your computer, you need to have that computer be certified that it's trustworthy before using it again. That might require that you rebuild your computer in order to make sure there's nothing on there that the attacker left behind. That's why having a backup is really important. If you don't have a backup, this could be a really big problem because you won't know if it's completely clean because people are crafty and they will hide things. If you have a backup, no sweat. Just wipe it and I'm going to put all my stuff back on there and we're back in business. So having your backup is really important. We talked about notifications and alerts, suspicious communications. You might also want to consider informing your suppliers, customers, and colleagues, especially if they are sending communications as you, like in Chris's case. Where to get help? The number 1 factor in reducing your losses is responding promptly. And knowing when something is happening and being able to take very swift action is important. So if you think something bad is happening, notifying the credit card or your bank right away is important. Any online service providers you have. Somebody's in my account, I need to call Facebook. I need to call, or not call, contact. They usually have an online contact form. I need to report this right away. Report quickly to those people who can do something to help you with your accounts and your money. Follow up with, you could file a police report. Sometimes that helps you to be able to prove your case. Sometimes it's just, okay, I have it in hand in case my attorneys find it useful or interesting. Reviewing if you have a problem with identity theft or you suspect an identity theft problem, there is a checklist of things that you can actually go through on identitytheft.gov that takes you through things like credit freezes and so on. The local FBI office is always a good place to contact. I can't say this as a government employee and not say don't call the FBI, but I will say they do stink at responding. You will send them a report. They actually take the data from those reports. They collate that data. They share it with other government agencies, and they use it to pursue criminals. But their record for customer service on those events is very poor. Don't expect that the FBI is going to come back to you and be like, hey, guess what? We caught the bad guy, and here's your money back. That is not what they do. They take the information and they use it to pursue the criminals and the organized crime that is perpetuating these attacks. They don't necessarily do things for you. We'll touch back on that in a second. Creating a security plan for your business. This is where I mentioned a little bit earlier, doing a tabletop test or asking yourself, what if something bad happened? What could I do to prevent that bad thing from happening? What am I already doing to protect myself? Could I do more? Is it worth it for me to invest in more? Having a thought exercise, either on your own or with other people involved in your business. If you have an IT guy or an IT gal, do a thought exercise with them. Say, if I lose this computer, what's the worst case scenario? How do I get it back? What are we not doing that could help us protect against that scenario? And it will help you assess the costs and benefits of changing your posture. Some more advanced steps. Now, I promised that these would be steps that everybody could take, so I didn't go deeply into questions like cyber insurance, but I did touch on them a little bit here. Looking at security software, I often get asked, well, all of the operating systems have security stuff built into them, so is it worth buying anything else? If you own a small business and you're using that computer in order to be able to do your business, yes, it's worth spending a couple extra dollars shelling out for some security software. Some of them have other features built into them, like you could get a suite that also has a password manager in it if you wanted. IT services, looking at product support, retained support. I think Chris mentioned the desktop support that he's getting help with. Those are good to have on hand or know who you would call if you needed their help. Risk management services, Jesper's contact is down here. That is the gentleman that Chris mentioned as a risk mitigation service provided by MaxSure that can help understand and help you understand and assess what's at risk for you. How much risk do you have? How can you protect yourself? And what steps can you take? What steps might you want to defer to something like insurance? So they can provide some consulting for you. You might also consider credit and account monitoring. People ask me a lot, like, is LifeLock really worth it? Because there's a lot of ads for LifeLock and things like that. Sure. I don't use LifeLock personally, but that's because I tend to be very like, I configure all of my own little alerts and monitoring. But services like that put it all together into one package for you. So it saves you the hassle of having to look at every single individual thing. It will just package that information up to you and serve it. Cyber insurance, the two tips I have on that. I've been down this on a corporate road before. I've not been down it on a small business road. So I can't say whether it's worth it to a small business, but I can give you some tips and things to look for. One is check the features on the cyber insurance and the exclusions, because a lot of cyber insurance has conditions in there that say things like, if you have a cyber attack and you start responding to it on your own, or you ask somebody else for help that's not our insurance company, we will not pay you. I've seen those clauses before. I've also seen clauses before that will say you have a separate policy for the cyber attack and a separate policy if it's ransomware, like you need separate for ransomware. So if you look into cyber insurance, look at those conditions very carefully and make sure it's something that you can do, that you want to do, and that it's worth the money to you to do. Because you might not want to spend more money on it if it's not going to give you that much coverage. It's just something to ask about. You can also lower your costs by taking some of these security steps. Like they'll send you a questionnaire. I filled out many of these. They'll say, do you use multi-factor authentication? Do you back up your systems and so on? And they use that to gauge your risk. And then lastly, Chris mentioned this, important for every small business, talk with your legal counsel. If you have legal counsel, if you don't have legal counsel, consider retaining legal counsel, because they will be able to game plan with you around some of these scenarios, give you good advice. They will also be able to help you in an emergency. So lastly, it's important, but it's not impossible to do business safely online. Taking some basic precautions can really help make a difference in your ability to avoid problems and also to anticipate and recover from problems. And lastly, preparing in advance can minimize losses for your business. I've got some additional resources here. I have a lot of very detailed slides on what is MFA and where do I find it and so on. I've put those under this link. You can use this QR code to get to the presentation or that little bit.ly link there, and it will download the main presentation and other slides underneath that tell you a little bit more about these different techniques. Some other resources for staying safe online are staysafeonline.org. It's one of my favorite websites. There's a whole section for small business. The U.S. Small Business Administration also has a pretty nice web page that gives you very basic steps that cover some of the things we talked about today. And with that, I will close. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'm happy to answer any questions, show you how things work, all these kind of things. But I appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone.